1,755. We have spent 3 months tallying up every single spider person in the entire Marvel multiverse. That is every Spider-Man, woman, child, pig, and man made out of spiders throughout all the comics, games, TV shows, movies, and beyond to answer one simple question. If you were to take a random spider person out of the Marvel multiverse, how likely would it be to be a Peter Parker?
Now that you've seen the number, we're gonna walk you through how we got to it and even how we were able to count up everyone in Across the Spider-Verse. It sucked. Seriously, it sucked. Hi, I'm Sir Superhero.
And I'm Comic Drake, and welcome to the Great Spider Census.
Do I have to hold this mug the entire time, or? Okay, no. Cool.
One of the most famous alternate universes in all of Marvel is the Zombieverse. That first series was written by Robert Kirkman, who you might also know as the creator of The Walking Dead, which ties in nicely to the sponsor of today's video, Walking Dead Match 3 Tales. Experience the story of the original Walking Dead comics through this well-made puzzle RPG where you need to solve to survive. Take the satisfying Match 3 gameplay that we all know and love, but throw in a whole squad of characters that, much like the comics, all have their own unique skills that can help with anything from battles to resource gathering. Manage your base to keep out those pesky walkers, and even assemble your own survivor crew through the Friend Invite event, which helps everyone get a big starting boost through VIP tickets that can be exchanged for some instant cash and building options. Get started today by clicking the link in the description, and again, huge thank you to Walking Dead Match 3 for sponsoring the video. But now, let's get back to it. The first thing we need to make clear is what exactly we're counting here. Across the multiverse, there are characters that are considered to be spider totems. Now, I go into great detail about what exactly that means in my award-winning video on the subject, but to quickly sum it up, if you have a spider on your chest, then you're magic. Except for the many, many exceptions. There's never been any real sort of consistency.
Well, technically there are an infinite number of universes, so in all reality, there are an infinite number of spider people.
Shut up, you know what we mean.
One of the most common questions we've gotten about this project has been, what about the symbiotes? And no, they don't count. They're not totems, and there's a reason why they've needed their own Venomverse event. Clones, though, clones count because they've been in all the Spider-Verse events and movies. Yay.
So, like we said at the top of the video, there are over 1,700 spider people on this list. And no, we are not going to go over every single one of them, because frankly, a bunch of them are boring as hell. If we sat here for hours and went, Peter Parker from Earth 10011 appeared in 2 panels, and Thanos Imperative number 3 in 2010. He didn't have any lines. Then you would legally be allowed to kill me for subjecting you to something that terrible. So to help make things easier to follow, we have broken down the research into easy to digest sections. 1, Peter Parker, obviously. 2, Peter-like. If your name is a Peter Parker pun, you're a gender swap or an animal variant, then you're a Peter-like. Bonus points if you have an Aunt May and or Uncle Ben. Or, well, Maya and Beam if you're Pav. The big ones is Miles, Gwen's, and Miguel's. Spider-Women is mostly Jessica Drew, but a few others are in there as well. And Amazing Friends and Foes are all of the people in Peter's life that have also gotten spider powers. That's your Aunt May, Flash Thompson, Uncle Ben, and even a few villains. Spider Kids, they're all the offspring of the spider people. Clones, they suck. And finally, the rest. So after all of that, let's jump in with the Spider-Man himself, Peter Parker.
Now, the most logical way to start this would be to go to the Marvel Wiki, look up Peter Parker, and count up everybody that appears. Except if it was that easy, this video wouldn't exist. First of all, not every Peter has spider powers. For example, in Spider-Gwen's universe, he becomes the lizard, and in this one, he gets bitten by a radioactive sheep and becomes Sheep Boy. So in order to get a truly proper estimate, Drake and I sorted through all 873 Peter Parker profiles manually, removed the irrelevant ones, and then found other spider-related Peters in our research that weren't on that wiki page, totaling us up to a number of 788. That is 718 Peters and a nice 70 Peter-like names, with 41 of those being animal variants for some reason. But there's another problem here. The wiki is a mess. It's really good for comics, movies, and TV, decent for video games, and trash for everything else. Not only that, but some of the Peter Parkers on there are listed twice. They don't have things like the Phineas and Ferb crossover. It's such a nightmare that we quickly have to have a mini segment here so you can see all the extra work we had to go through for this.
Video games. I think we can all agree that most alternate skins and costumes are just cosmetic goodies and not different characters, but there are many Spider-Man games that do play with the multiverse concept. In fact, Dan Slott was the writer of Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions and was inspired to further elaborate on that concept, which then ballooned into the Spider-Verse event that we know from the comics. Now, some multiversal spider games exploit the sheer amount of characters for microtransactions, and because they're just time wasters with basic plots, there's not a lot of good information about them on the Marvel Wiki. Take Spider-Man Unlimited, for instance. You would think that an infinite Infinite Runner mobile game would have the most simple lore, but if there's one thing I learned from working at game theory, it's that once you start overthinking these simple games, they end up turning into these massive rabbit holes of madness. So Unlimited's story is centered around the multiverse, and the character roster is huge, counting in at 226 playable skins. If this game counts, a large chunk of non-Peter Parkers would actually be coming from this one game. The problem though is that some of the costumes are clearly not different characters. Some are obvious, like Spider-Punk and Spider-Punk Unmasked, but to get to the bottom of which skins do and don't count, then we need to play this game for ourselves. There's just one small problem though. Spider-Man Unlimited has been taken off the App Store for years, and even if you got a copy of the file, the limited time events are impossible to access. Luckily though, some dedicated fans like the absolute legend Turkey Plays have recorded the game, and I shit you not, I have watched through over 500 of these videos to figure out which ones are canonically different characters. Like Superior Spider-Man changed outfits to Superior Octopus, which is wild considering that in the comics, Superior Spider-Man is Peter Parker's body with Doc Ock's brain, but Superior Octopus is a separate cloned body that is half of Peter Parker's DNA and half of Doc Ock's. After a couple of days of sifting through all of those videos, I was able to determine that only 85 of those skins are unique spider totems. And to make sure that my math was 100% correct, I had Amazing PSM double check my work. He's a Spider-Man superfan that made the definitive video on the game, so I trust him. The other mobile game that gave us trouble was Marvel Future Revolution, because they have many different spider people, including 2 Spider-Punks. However, Yuri Lowenthal voices every spider in that title, which was likely a move to save money, but it however has the unfortunate side effect of implying that these punks are Peter Parkers and not Hobie Browns, which frustrates me to no end.
The venom on my Earth is an absolute beast. I took him down though, because that's what I do. Venom is easy. It's carnage you have to look out for.
But then again, Yuri is also the main voice actor for Spider-Man Unlimited, and his voice clips are used for every male character from Peter to Hobie to even J. Jonah Jameson. So after going through a bunch of cutscenes from Future Revolution, I couldn't find any instances of those Spider-Punks being specifically referred to as Peter. So I'm going to make the executive decision to label them as Hobies.
Here's a weird little subsection of the video game category, Fortnite. There are several Spider-Man skins in the game: Miles, Gwen, 2099, MCU Peter, and Comics Peter, plus a bunch of alternate suits. The canon status of these is weird, though. Fortnite likes to claim that the characters in their canon are the actual primary versions, pulled across the multiverse to the Fortnite world somehow. But if this was the case, then these characters wouldn't count as separate for our census purposes. Also, though, this doesn't make any fucking sense. Putting main Marvel Universe characters into Fortnite would cause a bunch of continuity errors that I do not have the time to explain right now, so for the sake of simplicity, we are counting these 5, but as separate versions, not the main universe ones. There's also a bunch of Spider-Man novels that weren't listed on the wiki from multiple different publishers. We didn't have time to sit and read through all of these, but we read the summaries and didn't see anything that implied they were all from the same universe, so unless there's something from an established world like a movie novelization or Marvel's Superhero Squad, we made the call that each publisher is going to count as its own universe.
Another thing the wiki never considered are tabletop games, but I did, since as you can see, I am a huge tabletop fanatic. And let me tell you, I have a lot of experience with Marvel games. The question though is if they're in their own universes. I mean, hell, a lot of them pull characters from the multiverse like any big crossover comic event or video game. So to get to the bottom of things, I shook down all of my connections in the industry that I have made through my years as being a tabletop game developer and reached out to many publishers' PR teams, with the general consensus being that no, these games don't necessarily have their own stories, and as expected, they're just a bunch of plastic and cardboard. Sure, it didn't actually add anything to this count, but I think it further goes to show just how thorough we were for the research in this video. Quick aside, as a thank you for reaching out and asking, WizKids sent me a bunch of free hero clicks, and as a part of it, they included 36 pointing Spider-Men, which I'm pretty sure was a joke that was made by the PR team to reference how absurd this project was. So, well played. One other thing that's worth noting is that because board games don't count, this would also mean that the card game video games like Marvel Snap and Marvel Duel don't count for the purposes of this video as well. However, because the tabletop game Marvel Crisis Protocol actually has a series of novels, the spider characters from that game are in fact going to count. So after meticulously going through all that legwork, we are confident that the new Peter total is 830. Funnily enough, Spider-Ham has the most out of any individual variant, clocking in at 32. But one of them isn't a pig anymore since they were turned human by Dr. Doom, which prompted Peter to kill, cook, and eat him. Conversely, there is also a Peter Parker that was turned into a pig by the High Evolutionary. But enough porking around, here are some of the other Peter highlights. Spider-Friend. He's a sitcom character from the show Working It Out, where he struggles with being a young 20-something in New York City, his quirky friends, and his heroic double life. Talk about a tangled web. Princess Petra, aka Spinstress, is a straight-up Disney princess, and they even got Ariel Jacobs, who played Jasmine in the Broadway adaptation of Aladdin, to record a real version of her opening number.
Hello, hi there, my name is Princess, never mind, I'm not a princess in disguise, just an extremely normal girl, and so, just singing while I see the sights, my spider friend in my side, totally normal, come on Webster, it's gonna be okay, on this amazing, spectacular, sensational adventure today.
There's also the Spider-Man who appeared in the educational show The Electric Company who fought a sentient wall. And on the darker side of the spectrum, there's the Peter that killed the Green Goblin and assumed his identity. But for good, even though he's a murderer. I also want to point out that although most of the animated series aren't worth going over because they're just your bog standard Peter Parkers, the one from the 90s had its own Spider-Verse event way before it was cool. Some of the variants have amazing puns for names, like Peter Parked Car and Tur Tarker, but there's also some really bad ones like Peter Pooper and Peter Pooper, and somehow a third Peter Pooper. How about Spider Guy, who is an actual spider that was bitten by a radioactive teenager, and Spider Hulk, who was bitten by a spider, but specifically a gamma-irradiated spider. How that radiation ended up giving him a spider suit pattern, though, I don't know, and I'm not going to question it. But I think it's time to probably move on to some other non-Peters on this chart, otherwise we will be here all day.
For a character that's so important to the Spider-Verse right now, Miles actually has less unique versions than you'd expect. 77 in total, but most of those are background characters or cheeky little he might get powers later wink wink moments. The most notable variants are his animal forms, mostly because Marvel can't decide on one for the life of them. First off, we got a Miles Spider-Ham, of course, but then we got Spider-Mole, and recently they finally landed on a fan favorite, Meows Morales Spider-Cat. Gwen Stacy is another one with less versions than you might think. Plenty of Gwen, sure, many of whom do have powers, but surprisingly few of them have spider powers specifically. If we only count those, that leaves us with 50 exactly, most of whom are under the Ghost Spider name, not to be confused with Peter Parker Ghost Spider, who's just Spider-Man, but a Ghost Rider. Now, according to Charlotte Morales Stacy of Earth 8, a future child of Gwen and Miles, all of the Spider-Gwens in the multiverse have their own Council of Spider-Women, which I'm sure includes this Dinosaur, and Cowgirl, and Mech Pilot, and Batman? Spider-Man 2099 has 44 versions and gives us another weird one, Web Slinger. No, the Cowboy Spider-Man is not a Peter Parker variant, weirdly. There is a Web Slinger from the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon who is explicitly a Peter Parker, but the comics Web Slinger first introduces himself as Ponderosa Parker. Now this would land him solidly in the Peter-like category, but this name turned out to be an alias. His real name, for some reason, is Patrick O'Hara, which seems to tie him more to 2099. And yes, before you ask, his horse Widow 100% counts. He has spider powers, he wears a mask to hide his identity, clearly he's a superhero, so we put him in our miscellaneous category.
Pretty much every single supporting character in Peter Parker's life has been given spider powers in some way, shape, or form throughout the multiverse. Uncle Ben, Flash Thompson, Black Cat, Mary Jane, and others have all had their shot at being a spider, usually with it being they're the ones that got bitten at the science experiment instead of Peter. It's just a really simple explanation that allows for basically anybody to be slotted into that Peter Parker role. You can just make up new classmates and they're the ones that got bitten, much like Webweaver. Even J. Jonah Jameson has been a spider variant as Headline with his stylish newspaper jacket. And of course, since all of Peter's friends have gotten powers, it makes sense that plenty of his enemies have become spider people as well, with such iterations as Doc Ock, Norman Osborn, Kraven, and so many more. Now, I don't necessarily know if this counts as a variant of one of his enemies, but there's a Scottish dude going by Spider Laird named Donald McGargan, and that last name is clearly a reference to Mac Gargan, better known as the Scorpion. Scorpion. The most common person in this category of friends and foes, though, is surprisingly Aunt May. Her most notable appearance is as the Amazing Spider-Man, but there's also this page which has just a couple more variants of her: Bombastic Bag Ma'am, Ghost Ma'am, Ma'am Spider, and so many more. Essentially every major identity that Peter has had, Aunt May has also had somewhere out there in the multiverse. She's even been Carnage.
Speaking of Peter's family and friends, plenty of younger relatives share Peter's abilities too. Now you might be wondering, younger relatives? What younger relatives? And for that, I direct you to the many future AUs. All of the major spiders have kids in some universe or another. Peter has Mayday, Annie Mae, and Benji Parker, several of each in fact. Miles and Gwen have Max and Charlotte Morales Stacy, and 2099 has Gabriel O'Hara. In total, these kids number 53, with versions of Mayday making up a huge chunk of that at 36. One of the weirder spider kids, though, is Spider Baby, the child of Peter and MJ, who has a mutant gene that made him into this spider creature.
But what about the most famous pregnant spider person? Jessica Drew, the first Spider-Woman. She's been around for nearly as long as Peter Parker at this point, but she had like nothing to do with the Spider-Verse for the longest time. At first, she was a literal spider that was mutated by the High Evolutionary, but she's been retconned to hell with a new origin basically every other year, which led to Dan Slott saying, fuck it, she's a totem now, so he threw her into the Spider-Verse events and now she's tangled up with all of this nonsense. So because of that, Jessica's 125 variants are included in this count, which gives her the highest total of anyone on this list both now and later in the video that is not named Peter Parker, which of course means that the 7 variants of her son Gary are also going to count here as well. Or is it Jerry? I never actually heard it said out loud. But many a Spider-Woman has followed in Jessica's footsteps, including Julia Carpenter and Maddie Franklin. Plus, the Old Man Logan series features Ashley Barton, the amazing Spider Bitch. And for a heavy contrast, how about Spider-Girl, Spider-Man's cousin from the Spider-Man and Friends picture books? Unfortunately though, for as much as these and characters like Anya Corazon and Madam Web are great heroes with some fantastic stories under their belts, there really aren't that many notable variants of them out there in the multiverse. They usually just appear as themselves, but in another universe, or they're just background cameos.
There's no comic book character more associated with clones than Spider-Man, with the 90s clone saga being one of the longest and most infamous events in all of comics history. It became such an old school meme that Marvel even made a one-shot comic called 101 Ways to End the Clone Saga. Now, the most notable Peter clone is Ben Reilly, having first appeared back in the 70s, which landed him a spot in the live-action TV show.
That's right, Peter. I'm you, and you're me. And this is a gun.
Ben became a lot more famous as the Scarlet Spider, and there's also Kane, who's the even edgier Scarlet Spider. There are a lot of variants of these two throughout the multiverse, 58 Bens and 25 Kanes, but like the Spider-Women, most of them are really similar to their base form without too much to highlight. However, the clones do get weirder once you get past this pair to the miscellaneous clones. And let me just say that I love the fact my job allows me to say the words miscellaneous clones in an entirely serious context. There's not a ton of these, only 34 in total, but there are some worth noting. Most of the other Peter clones were all made by this dude, the Jackal, and outside of Ben and Kane, he made such weirdos as Guardian, Spider-Side, and the one he molded in his own image, Jack. The most common clone, other than the Scarlet Spiders of course, is Doppelganger, essentially an evil magic clone of Spider-Man if he was like 80% spider and 20% man. A far worse one though is Webman, an evil Spider-Man made by Dr. Doom's wonderfully named Twin Machine. Webman wasn't too successful because he was basically an opposite Bizarro-style Peter, which meant not only was he evil, he was also incredibly stupid and couldn't get anything done. Then there's Dark Spider-Man. He's also evil, but like,
I'm not your exact double. Doom made a few modifications. Well, it looks like he ruined my sense of fashion and trashed my voice. Is that it? Or did he make other changes? Yes. He gave me the desire to kill my enemy.
Also worth mentioning that Peter isn't the only one who gets the clone treatment. Miles also got a couple with varying degrees of weirdness between them. All this leads to a single question. Do clones count as new people? Are new beings made from Peter Parker's DNA truly new beings at all? If someone has memories of a life that they never truly lived, are those memories really something that they have any claim to? Even if they decide to take on a new name or a new life or a new purpose, can they ever really become something truly independent from the one that originated them, whether they ever wanted to be made in the first place or not? I don't know, I'm just a comic book nerd, so when Drake and I give you the tallies at the end of this video, we're gonna give you one that includes the clones as variants of the originals, and one that doesn't. Take that, philosophy.
And finally, what is likely going to be the longest segment of this video, the rest. Now, there were a lot of really specific cases in this count that required some critical thinking. Like, does the Spider Queen, the lady who made out with Peter Parker, which caused him to become a massive spider and then have him hatch out with organic webs, count as a totem? What about deities like the African god Anansi, or mythical figures like Arachne from the failed Broadway musical Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark? Does Combo Man, the snack food tie-in character with the hands of Spider-Man, count? We debated back and forth on these fringe cases and even consulted with some friends like Kevin Garcia, who was actually one of the writers for the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, to really wrap our head around these. We managed to come up with some really interesting rules around who does and doesn't count as a result. Take, for instance, the Lady Spider clause. This steampunk Aunt May isn't a totem and doesn't actually have spider powers of her own, but she's still in all the Spider-Verse events and the movies, which kind of makes her like an honorary totem. If we include her in this count, then that opens up the floodgates for other related heroes like Mary Jane Watson's Spinnerette, whose suit simply emulates Peter's powers when he's nearby, and Valerie, a woman from the Electric Company spin-off comics that created her own method of sticking to walls and became a Spider-Woman a few years before the main Marvel Universe got their own.
The other big guideline is the Gwenpool rule. Marvel frequently likes to make fun alternate covers for their comics that follow sort of monthly themes, and when Spider-Gwen first came out, all of their comics got new Gwen variants, with one of them, Gwenpool, becoming so popular that she became a fully fledged character in her own right. Using this logic, technically, any spider people who appear in a variant cover also exist within the Marvel Multiverse, and that adds up to a lot because almost every Marvel hero has a spider version of themselves out there, like Deadpool, Storm, She-Hulk, Ghost Rider, Shang-Chi, Echo, Hellcat, Black Panther, and Silver Surfer, just to name a few of them. And in a similar vein, Marvel put out a little contest of sorts for fans to submit their very own Spider-Sonas, which would then become canon and maybe even appear in Across the Spider-Verse. These include such gems as Sun Spider, Sea Spider, Garden Spider, Spinster, I'm sorry, is one of them just V?
Just V.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was a typo. Spinster, V, and Spider Ramen, whose name is Peter Potnoodle.
Ramen is a Chinese dish that became popular in Japan. And you know what else became huge over there? Spider-Man. Is that really the transition we're doing?
You got a better one?
Nope. By this point, everyone knows all about the live-action Japanese TV show from the 70s. The one where Takuya Yamashiro is injected with alien spider blood from the planet Spider, and becoming Spider-Man, the emissary from hell, with such notable powers as rope web, not wearing a cup, and mech. But there are just so many more Japanese Spider-Men out there. For example, Marvel tried their hands a couple of times at making their own manga-inspired comics, but they also just straight up enlisted the help of actual mangaka, like the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! Kazuki Takashiki. There's also Spider-Man J, which was published in the Japanese magazine Comic Bomb Bomb. The J stands for Japan. Some of my personal favorite Japanese spider people are Reina from Peach Momoko's Demon Day series, who uses spider venom and yo-yos to attack, and also Sakura Spider, who is clearly just Ochako from My Hero Academia.
We'd also be remiss to not mention that there have been many other spider people who originate from outside of the US and Japan. Multiple Spider UKs, Spider Canada, who was made specifically for Across the Spider-Verse, Comrade Arachnid from Russia, Arachnido Jr. from Mexico, and the most well-known at this point, Pavitra Prabhakar. Speaking of Mexico, although he doesn't technically count as a foreign spider totem, it is interesting to note that Mexico used to reprint old American Spider-Man comics, but they actually got the go-ahead from Marvel to write completely original stories. So this Peter Parker's history totally diverges from the main one, including the fact that Gwen Stacy never died in this universe. Other amazing miscellaneous spiders include Spider-Punk, Bruce Banner as Spider-Man, not Hulk this time, just Spider-Man, the multiversal nomad Spider-Zero, the Navajo warrior Spider-Weaver, and of course, Stan Lee himself. And then there's just a giant list of spiders that defy classification in every way possible. For example, here's one of the strangest ones we found in all our hours of research. Arachnophilia, who looks like this and has like slime webs, and also that's not a suit, that's her skin. I've said enough about her, let's move on. Silly Spider is a newspaper comic written by P.T. Parker, who somehow manages to cross the boundaries of reality and come to life, which leads to a really cool difference in art style. Quick unrelated one too, but there's also a spider duck named Webster, who's just straight up drawn in the art style of Calvin and Hobbes. Joseph Wade is the Scarlet Spider, but probably not one of the ones that you've heard of. This one got trapped in a VR simulation and was forced to commit crimes as a hologram of the real Scarlet Spider. Now, you might think that this guy doesn't count as a spider-powered character since his abilities were just tech-based, but then he appeared in the background of a Spider-Verse comic, which implies that he does count. This panel isn't even listed online. We just happened to find it in our research, so into the list he goes. Although I guess it's not too far-fetched since Spider-Bite exists and she's just a VR avatar. And then there's Schneider Man. We don't know why he's named this. We looked and we didn't find anything. If it's a reference, we genuinely don't know it, but he's here and he counts. And that is quite literally all that I can say about him.
Also included in the count is Spider's Man, the colony of spiders that absorbed the consciousness of Peter Parker, the unreleased Spider-Girl Halloween costume that was randomly made into a background character as a part of an anti-marijuana PSA, who is clearly not any of the actual Spider-Girls we've already seen in the comics. Dingle Dog, the fairly amazing Spider-Hound, and both Donald Duck and Goofy have been Spider-Folks in variant covers. But this Dutch Donald Duck comic not only has a Spider-Man of its own, but Donald becomes the Spectaculaire Spinade. I am so sorry to the 0.6% of my audience that is from the Netherlands.
One other thing we should address on this topic, there are quite a few unique spider people who only appear in the backgrounds of 1 or 2 panels. These are going to count in our total, but since it's not really possible to verify their identity, we're going to give them their own category. And I think that's it, except for the elephant in the room.
Yes, this is the part that most of y'all have been waiting for. The Spider Society. We went frame by frame through these scenes to try and catch them all, and let me tell you, it got mind-numbing. I was so out of it at one point that I legitimately mistook this potted plant for Garden Spider when it was all zoomed in. It was a long night. Here's something interesting though. Although we saw dozens of familiar faces who were already counted in our chart, we weren't able to find a single Silk.
Drake, did we forget to talk about Silk in this?
I think we did.
Silk! She's a great character when Dan Slott's not writing her. There's about 16 variants of her, none of which are that interesting, but we speculate that she wasn't included in Across the Spider-Verse because she's probably going to be a major player in the next movie, since she's a special spider totem called the Queen. If you're watching this in the future, whenever Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out, and we did get it right, you owe us a like and subscribe.
Thanks.
No problem.
Unfortunately, a large amount of the folks in the Spider Society appear to be completely brand new designs that were made just for the movie. And on top of that, they tend to get reused over and over and over again. So trying to pin down the exact number is a Spider-Herculean task. Well, that is if Spider-Herc was an actual totem and not just a temporary power-up. Regardless, Across the Spider-Verse writer Phil Lord confirmed that the movie has 240 characters, and that's great. One small question though, what the hell does that actually mean, Phil? We decided to interpret this very vague statement as being the total number of unique character models in the movie, and that for the extras that populate the densest scenes, the models were likely to be reused and have texture swaps to give the illusion of greater diversity for next to no extra work. So we went through the movie again, and counted up the most obvious unique models. That's all of the main characters, the guidance counselor, the bodega clerk, the locked up villains, etc. Then we went through the movie for a third time and counted up as many unique extras that we could in New York, Jeff's Party, and Mumbattan, and subtracted all of them from the total, then doing the same thing for the Spider Society, counting up all the unique models that we could, and then subtracting them. That leaves us with 94 untagged characters. So by splitting that down the middle, let's just say that 47 of those are non-Spider extras, and the other 47 are random Spider Society members, plus the 30 unique models that we counted whose identity that we can't confirm. That seems reasonable, and it's safe to say though that since we couldn't find a regular Silk, none of these extras would be her. Plus, since Miles is the quote-unquote original anomaly, it likely would be that there's no other variants of him there as well.
Oh, and let's talk about that spider therapist for a second, because in a very ironic twist, he ended up causing us some of the most stress out of this entire movie. Rumors have been going around for a while that this guy was in fact not a Peter Parker, and was instead a version of Ezekiel Sims, another spider totem from the comics. This rumor started thanks to a diploma hanging in his office with his name on it, but here's the thing. In the movie, he has 2 diplomas, both of which aren't shown in enough detail to actually make out a name. In fact, in some of the trailers, one of the diplomas isn't a diploma at all and is replaced by some sort of blue painting. Complicating this more though, in only one of the trailers, that diploma is inexplicably shown in a higher resolution than even the movie itself. And yeah, it says Ezekiel Ezekiel Sims. While it's not readable in the movie, it is easy to tell that those two diplomas are the same, so we're counting him as Ezekiel, I guess? It's not 100% locked down, but I think that's our best bet.
So in total, we can confidently say that there are likely 1,715 spider people in the Marvel Multiverse. Except if you're paying attention, that wasn't the number that we quoted at the beginning of the video. Because here's the issue. Across the Spider-Verse claims that Miguel O'Hara comes from Earth 928, which is the exact same as the original Spider-Man 2099 from the comics. But that is just not true considering that they are clearly different people, and that would make a lot of sense. Of course these aren't the actual characters being pulled out of the worlds. None of them reference the events of Across the Spider-Verse in all of their comics and shows and movies and games. Some people like Earth 94 Scarlet Spider and Spider-Cat are also straight up dead in the comics. Furthermore, could you imagine the existential crisis that the Insomniac Spider-Man would have if he knows for a fact that he's a video game character? He is already dealing with 19 inches of venom he can't handle anymore. So in order to get the most accurate count possible, we need to take all the recognizable people in the society that we have already been keeping track of, double it, and give it to the next chart, which brings us to the final count of 1,755.
So let's break down those stats and start off by answering our original question. If you pluck a random person out of the Spider-Verse, what are the odds that it's Peter? After all this exhaustive research, we figured out that Peters and Peter-likes make up about 48.38% of the entire Spider-Verse, 54.76% if you're counting his clones. Jessica Drew, Miles, and Gwen Stacy make up the next most common characters, but with a huge drop to 7.18%, 4.39%, and 2.91% respectively. And out of all the Spider folks we couldn't find the names of, including random extras from Spider Society and random one-off background appearances, that only makes up 5.7%, which I think is a more than decent margin of error. Just clones of everyone, not just Peter, make up 7.07%, which means about 1 in 14 of all the spiders is a clone. Wild.
We obviously know that this video is going to age like milk because, of course, spider people are going to exist after this video is made. Hell, while I'm talking right now, 7 more probably just popped into existence. Hi, Drake from the future here. Yes, literally as soon as I filmed this, Marvel announced that there is going to be a new Spider-Verse event complete with a spider version of Cyclops. However, we have pored over the data, double-checked our math. We have scoured every nook and cranny of the entire Marvel multiverse into places that the wiki didn't deem necessary of logging down. And yes, there is going to be some margin of error. There is going to be some human problem. Maybe I mistook a 1 here and there, but I am pretty damn confident that this is the most accurate spider count on the entire internet. It better be, otherwise I just wasted 3 months of my life. For the love of God, please like and subscribe, and follow Sir Superhero on TikTok and Twitch because we worked so damn hard on this.
Oh my God.
And Panda, I hate that you randomly had this hypothetical question one morning while having coffee because nobody could have anticipated that we would spend a quarter of our year combing through all of this nonsense.
Drake, thanks so much for having me on. If you ever bring up Spider-Man around me again, I'm gonna stab you.
Valid. But anyway, if you like this video, then please consider subscribing or even watching another one. And hey, if you like this, I got plenty more Spider-Man videos out there, an entire playlist of them in fact, so maybe give some of those a watch. But anyway, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.